If you don't like to take shots, take the oral. I created Species Nutrition with one mission in mind: to provide bodybuilders and serious athletes with no-nonsense supplements that work. I put my name and reputation on every bottle of Species Nutrition products. If you want to be your absolute best, join the evolution.
RX Television, RxMuscle.com. This is Ask Dave, your 30-minute question and answer show with Dave Palumbo. Bodybuilding, non-bodybuilding, Arnold Classic, post-Arnold Classic fallout, whatever is on your mind. I'm your host, Sadiq Faruqi. So glad you could join us on this, the 6th day of March in the year 2024. We now bring in Dave Palumbo. Dave, before we get to the questions, there was some... I guess there's developing news. Samson Dauda putting out on his Instagram story that he is not feeling well as of the Arnold Classic, and for various reasons relating to his health. He may be a question mark, if not doubtful, for the Arnold Classic UK, which would have set up the rematch between him and Hadi Choopan next weekend.
Yeah, it's a shame, because but Samson's been pushing his body pretty hard over the last 2 years, really. I mean, I think Milos told me he did 13 shows in the last 18 months or something like that. So that's pretty tough. Also, I mean, he got beat pretty handily at the Arnold here, and I'm sure he's realizing more than likely the results for the Arnold UK will be exactly the same, with Hadi in first and him in second. Having said that, I think he is a little, over dehydrated, probably feeling sad about the loss, obviously, because, he was the favorite going in there, or one of the favorites, obviously. He was the defending champion, at least. And, I think he'll regroup and he'll wind up doing the show. That's my suspicions. I think he's just on a little bit of a downward spiral psychologically right now. And you know what? Why of course. I mean, he wanted to win the show. But I wanted to say one thing about that also. I noticed that Samson blocked me on Instagram. And, he's probably upset with the fact that, I said he wasn't in good enough shape to win the show. I critiqued his physique. But you got to remember, I'm the guy who was picking him to win. Okay, I was going out on a limb, and I was the guy who was saying that, this guy should win the show. If he holds all the cards in his own hand, he's got a great physique. He's got the wow factor. So I'm a big Samson Dauda fan. I've interviewed him before. I mean, so I'm hardly a guy who's super critical of him. But when I have to critique a show as a commentator, and that's what my job is, I have to call it like I see it. And Samson was not in good enough shape. Hadi smoked him in the conditioning department. And, we threw a couple little funny things in there when I was talking with Dennis Wolf, that maybe, because Dennis was saying that Hadi trains 3 hours a day. I said, maybe Samson should go train with Hadi, a little bit, and try to capture some of that juju he's got there for getting in great condition. And, that was obviously a joke, a tongue-in-cheek joke. But, when people get off a big loss and they're feeling down on themselves, sometimes people take things personally. And unfortunately, that was not the way it was leveled at him. It was really just done in a constructive criticism way, because that's what I do. And look, I've had problems with people in the past, so a lot of people, the truth hurts, it's our moniker here. And unfortunately, hopefully once Samson gets over this, little bit of mourning he's in and gets back to, that warrior mentality that he has, he'll realize that I was just doing my job. But I love Samson, and I know he's going to be back and better than ever. Maybe he needs a little break. If I were him, I would muscle through this next show, collect your prize money. Even if he takes second, who cares? Get the money and then shut it down to the Olympia and rest yourself a little bit. But that comes with the territory. You know, he was on a high. When you're going up, eventually you're going to drop a little bit. It's impossible not to. And this was hardly a big drop. He was second place here, you know, by a mile. And, you know, I think he's still considered the top 3 guy in the world. And come Olympia time, he's going to be a threat to win the Mr. Olympia. And that's really what it's all about, the Mr. Olympia title.
So on that note, we get to the questions, the first 2 questions on this show from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. Main difference between short and long-acting insulin for muscle growth. I know we took the similar question, but I think that was a little bit more in terms of the properties of insulin in general for muscle growth. This one breaks down short versus long-acting for muscle growth.
You know, it's interesting. We've been getting a lot of insulin questions lately. Everyone is pretty consumed with insulin. And I'll say this, there are different reasons to use either a long-acting or a short-acting insulin. And I've probably mentioned this innumerable times, but it's worth mentioning because a lot of people keep asking the same question. If your fasting blood sugars in the morning tend to be high, because think about it, you're not eating while you're sleeping. Your liver is just releasing glucose that's stored while you're sleeping. If your pancreas can't adapt to that, like while you're not awake, then that's the job for long-acting insulin. The reason being is because you can't wake up in the middle of the night and take a shot of fast-acting insulin because you wouldn't know when to take it, it has to be on board already. Like, in other words, it has to be in the background working. So a long-acting insulin usually fixes a high fasting blood sugar in the morning over 90. And that's what we use that for. It also helps the blood sugars during the day too, because you always have like a baseline of insulin running in the background. It takes away the burden. It takes the burden off the pancreas to have to produce more and more insulin, especially if you're increasing your food intake in an off-season scenario. Very rarely do I see guys with high fasting blood sugars when they're dieting, because when they're dieting, they're eating lower carbs, their food intake is much lower, so the demand on the pancreas is much lower. Now, some guys, you know, just don't absorb. They have to eat so much food because their metabolism is so fast that they need help during the day, during the meals, because the meals are big, they're high carb meals, and they're not able to absorb the food properly, okay, essentially. So they're eating all this food and they're not gaining any weight. And they're like, it's almost like it's going through me, which it probably is. In that case, if you take a faster acting insulin, and I'm a big, rather than use a super fast acting like a Humalog or Novolog, which it releases immediately and then it's done, I like a semi-fast acting insulin like a Novolin R or a Humulin R. The R version has 2 peaks. So it initially releases half of its load, and then in 2 hours it releases the other half. So it kind of covers 2 meals. And, you know, so if you take a 10-unit shot of like a Novolin R, the 10 units will cover 100 grams of carbs, but it only covers 50 grams at the first meal, it'll cover 50 at the next. And so if you're eating 50 grams of carbs per meal, a 10-unit shot would be great for meal 1 and 2. And then if you want to take another one for meal 3 and 4, you can do another one. And that's usually the way we use a long-acting insulin. Now, if you use the Humalog, which is only releases immediately, you'd have to take 4 separate shots. So it's easier to do the Novolin or Humulin R version. Plus, the R versions don't require a prescription. You can go to Walmart and buy it for $25. Same thing with the long-acting insulin, the Novolin N, okay, is available without a prescription for $25 at Walmart. And that's where most bodybuilders go get it. So they don't need a prescription, and it's just easier that way. And that's how you use it. Now, the problem is if you tend to get fat real easily, because you probably over-release insulin already, taking a fast-acting insulin with your meals might make you fatter. And in a lot of cases, it does, because those people already produce enough insulin. It's the hard gainers that tend to do better with the fast-acting insulins. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. Everyone doesn't follow the same protocol. It depends on what your fasting blood sugars are, how much food you're consuming, and what your metabolism is. And that will determine how you should use or not use insulin.
Let's go to the second question. Again, these questions from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. Is it possible that one muscle group responds to volume, but another to intensity?
I mean, yes and no. Most muscle groups will respond to, high intensity, heavier weights. Some muscles, I think what happens is when people use too much weight, they're really not using the muscle the way they want to. Like let's use calves, for instance. Okay, some people just have genetically great calves. They don't even have to do anything. Just walking on them, they have big calves. And then some people are really hard calf gainers. They just don't grow calves at all. But everyone can put muscle on their calves. And I think the calf muscle responds better to slightly higher reps, because when you go lower reps with heavier weights, what people tend to do is not do full range of motion, or they're using the bottom of their feet to really push the weight up, and they're not really using their calves. So I find that when you use a slightly less weight, where you're going, maybe a little more volume, up to 15 reps, you're really focusing on squeezing that calf muscle and contracting it properly. And I see better results when people do that. So the calf muscle is an example, just because I think people will cheat, and it's hard to it's like if you're benching, if you're coming down to your chest with the bar or not. Okay, with the calf, are you going down low enough to get enough of a stretch, or maybe you're taking it's too short? It's hard to modulate that. Same thing with a pull down. You do a pull down, you pull the thing to your chest, or you don't pull it to your chest. If your range of motion is short. Same thing with a squat. If you don't go all the way down, you can. And someone takes a picture, you're going to see you're not getting down to parallel or below parallel. So it's a little easier to judge. So most muscle groups respond to lower volume, heavy weights, and they grow. If you're using full range of motion. Like I said, some muscles are a little harder. Like I think if you did for abs, if you did heavy weights and you did very low volume, I think you would be cheating with your core muscles, like your psoas muscles and your hip flexors. So that doesn't really work. So it's better. So abs also respond better to more repetitions, like with body weight only, just doing crunches and lifts and stuff like that. So, aside from those two muscle groups, usually muscle groups all respond pretty favorably to, like I said, the lower reps, 4 to 6 with heavy weights, full range of motion, good form. That's just what I've seen. Do some people grow from doing high volume? Yeah, but not a lot of people do.
Let's go to our Facebook.
I just wanted to say these questions are from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. It's an app I have. You can download it. It's $29 a month. You get Dave Palumbo as your coach in your back pocket, essentially. It's all my videos I've ever done, all my writings. I do a Q&A video just for the app every week. I answer everyone's questions and I answer them in an open forum so everyone sees that. We do a workout every week we put up there, and it's a great source of information that's constantly evolving. So from week to week, it gets better and better. So check it out. I appreciate all the support for all the members we have.
Let's take questions from our Facebook page and Instagram page. If you're not already following us on Facebook, just go into the search bar, RxMuscle, on Instagram, official_RxMuscles. Go to Kayvon Southernia. Are AIs really damaging to inside your arteries, or is it the lower than average estrogen levels that's responsible for the damage?
Good question. I don't know. It's a very good question, because there is some evidence, and I know Jay Campbell's come on our show and talked about how he feels that the AIs are actually destroying or damaging the internal lining of the blood vessels, and that's what's causing clots and problems. But it could just be that the estrogen is too low, and the estrogen is not protecting the blood vessels. So the answer to the question would be, assuming the second option is what's really doing it, right? Not enough estrogen. Don't lower your estrogen that low, which makes sense, right? I mean, I always tell people you don't want to annihilate estrogen. If it's too low, you don't get a pump. You can lose your sex drive. That's not good. Androgen receptor sensitivity has a lot to do with estrogen. That's why women's androgen receptors are so good, because they have estrogen there. So you need some estrogen present. So you want to be on the low normal end of estrogen, but you don't really want to be below that. So watch out taking too many aromatase inhibitors, because less is not necessarily better. We want to be low, but not zero. And I think if you can do that and use the aromatase inhibitor to balance your estrogen, especially if you have very, very high estrogen, and bring it down into the normal range, I think you're safe. I think if you go too low, below normal, I think then you can risk maybe having some of these, blood vessel wall damaging effects. Enough people have used aromatase inhibitors over the years for quite a long time now that I think we would see a lot more problems if that was the case. But I don't think everyone abuses them. There are people I know that take a ridiculously high amount of them, which I think is idiotic. But I don't think the aromatase inhibitor itself is what's damaging the blood vessels. I just don't see it. It doesn't seem likely to me in that scenario. So very good thought-provoking question.
Let's go to Nicholas Cantemir. Why is it in Europe all the competitors use T4 and T3 when T4 is the inactive hormone? They use a lot of T4 and no more than 25 mcg of T3.
Well, I don't really know exactly what everyone uses over there. That's a pretty generalized statement. But I will say this, that the T4 is inactive thyroid. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't increase your metabolic rate, nothing. Now, if you do take some T4, some of it will convert to T3 if your body needs extra T3. But if the goal is to boost your T3 levels up, your active thyroid, because you want to burn fat more, then taking pure T3 is going to be a much, much better option and much more measurable too, right? Because when you take a T4, T3 combination, in reality, you should only worry about the T3 component and not even think about the T4 component, which is a little kooky, because why even take the T4 if it's not doing anything? So I never understood that, but I mean, you could take a combo, but really the T3 part of the combo is the only thing doing something metabolically speaking.
Let's go to our Instagram questions again at official_RxMuscle. Alexander Ruin, coach, your list for best exercises for back thickness.
Bent over rows, number one, probably. Deadlifts, if you do them right. Deadlifts do work the legs and glutes as well as the lower back and the upper trap. So it's like a total body thickness movement, but it definitely engages the back a lot too. So I mean, the stabilization. Anyone who deadlifts heavy weight, you can take a look at their erectors, spinal erectors, and they're like huge, thick, dense, and I think Mike Francois always had great ones. Akeem Williams, so you can see the guys who do their deadlifts. But I like bent over rows. I like pull downs. Just doing that pull down movement will actually bring those lats out. It thickens them. Dorian loved. I don't really do them that much. Dorian liked the pullover machine because he felt that worked the front part of the lat that flares, and he had some pretty sick look front parts of his lats. They were impressive. Obviously, the traps are part of your back too. So doing, like I said, deadlifts and shrugs work that part as well. So the back is a complex muscle group because it's spread out. So while every movement works all those muscles, certain movements target certain areas more than others. Like pull downs work the lats that flare out here more. Rows, straight on rows, like if you're sitting on a rowing machine, is going to work more of the middle back. Bent over barbell rows kind of work the whole back. So, you got to do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little of that. You can't just do one exercise for back and expect to get full development. And that's why you'll see people doing multiple. I try to pick 4 exercises for back every time I do it. And then I'll do something for lower back, like either hyperextensions or deadlifts. So if I do that, I feel like I do enough. Because if you run around and try to do 8 different exercises all in the same workout, you wind up overtraining. So when you go into the gym, say, I'm going to pick 4 movements I'm going to do for back, and I'm going to make those count. I might do 3 sets, 4 sets each, and really, really give 100% to that. And I think doing that is going to be your best bet.
Let's go to Daniel Guzman. Can I get your thoughts on sub-Q versus intramuscular injections?
I don't like the whole idea of taking a shot every single day. It becomes too much after a while. And so when I did my shots back in the day, it was more of like an every other day thing. So I was doing usually 2 or 3 cc's every other day of if I was doing tested EQ or tested DECA, whatever I was doing. And I can't see injecting that much volume under the skin sub-Q. It's too much. It would start welting up and stuff like that. I want to put it deep into the muscle so it gets absorbed. So I don't really think it's a viable option for people who are doing decent amounts of drugs, to do it every day or use insulin pens. Now, if you're doing hormone replacement, that's a different story because you're only doing 1 cc a week, right? So if you want to divide it up into 5 shots, small mini shots you're going to put under the skin, it'll probably be fine to do that. Is it necessary? Probably not. I've been doing HRT for a long time before I stopped and then I started up again. I find that if you do 2 shots a week of HRT, like a Monday, a Friday, or a Tuesday, Saturday, that works fine. You don't get dips, you don't get like drops, you don't get highs. It's pretty steady once you get going on it. And I think that's more than adequate. But if you like to take a shot every day, there's nothing wrong with that. I just don't like sub-Q shots. I don't like anything under the skin because then you start getting marks on the skin and it welts up a little bit. Sometimes you take a bad one and it gets, it gets all puffy and it makes you hold water there. I like to put it into the muscle so I know it's going right into the bloodstream.
Do you believe in genetics when it comes to different ethnicities? So this question's from Bilal Hamidi. Says most bodybuilding competitions, he's from Dubai, says that the majority of the competitors there are Iranian. Do you feel like bodybuilding genetics is favored to some countries' backgrounds more so than others?
Well, I don't know. I think certain people have better body parts. Middle Eastern guys have great abs. We all know that. I mean, you can see that. Asian people have great calves. Sometimes African American people from certain countries have no calves. They have very small calves. You just see it in different ethnicities. You can look and see what their physiques. The Middle East guys have a definite look, about that, and I think it's because of the abs. They have great ab insertions. Samir comes to mind. He had the most symmetrical looking abs of all time. But there's a lot of guys from that, Egypt and that whole Middle Eastern area that have really, really nice abs. And the Asian people have great legs, like I said, including great calves. So, I think when you get these guys that are like a blend of different nationalities, you get the best of the best. Like, look at Kevin Levroni's like half African American, half Italian. I mean, that's Italian, great genetics right there. So he got the best of both. Sometimes, it works out, and sometimes it doesn't. It's rolling the dice. I always tell people, I breed snakes, and sometimes you get a $10 snake you produce in a litter, and sometimes you get a $10,000 snake. And it's really just a matter of chance. Will the genes line up right and create the right colors and patterns that you're looking for? If they do, you hit the jackpot. If they don't, you sell the snake as a pet. And that's the same thing with bodybuilding. Some bodybuilders are genetic jackpots, and some other bodybuilders are just, they're average. And that's just the way it goes. That's the world we live in. Genetics is just mostly just blind luck.
Let's go to JJ Hepner. What do you think is better, injectable or oral DIANABOL? I've seen injectable Anadrol. Your thoughts? So I guess the original question, oral versus injectable DIANABOL.
Yeah. Before I answer that question, I want to just thank House of Pain for #1 coming on board as a sponsor. House of Pain clothing is just awesome. This is actually their new V-neck, which my microphone is kind of tugging on a little bit. This is one of their V-neck t-shirts I really like in black. And they sent me a whole bunch of other stuff. Check it out at House of Pain clothing. There you go. Good pull, Sid. And they got some great stuff. And they got a lot of new styles coming out too. And we will update you when they arrive. So thank you for that. Now, getting back to the question. What was the question again?
Yeah, injectable versus oral DIANABOL. Yeah.
I love injectable DIANABOL much better than the orals, because the injectable form doesn't seem to affect your appetite as much as the oral form, because the oral forms of DIANABOL and Anadrol especially really, really put a lot of strain on the digestive system, especially certain people. I was never able to eat well on oral Anadrol. It just killed my appetite. Like, I would last like 3-4 days on it. I'm like, I can't do it. DIANABOL, I was able to eat a little bit more. It kind of blunted my appetite a little bit, not terribly. So when I tried injectable DIANABOL back in the day, I was like, wow, this stuff is great, because I got the benefits of the debol and I was actually able to eat. It didn't seem to affect my appetite. Matter of fact, I think it made me hungrier. Now, I've never seen injectable Anadrol. It wasn't around when I was competing. Anadrol is still a very toxic drug, even when it's not oral and it's being injected. I would personally, you can do whatever you want. I would stay away from Anadrol. I think it's one of those drugs that, yes, it's strong, but I just don't think it's worth the risk to benefits ratio. I think there's more risk than there is benefit from it. Whereas DIANABOL is a really good anabolic, and the risks are not quite as bad. The liver toxicity is not that bad. In the injectable form, it's much less than in the oral form too. And it's something that doesn't seem to wreak as much havoc on your body. And it might be because the dosage is lower. I don't know. But because, Anadrol is 50 milligrams. I mean, I know you can't really compare drugs milligram for milligram, but Anadrol definitely seems to be stronger, and not necessarily stronger in a good way. It's stronger in every way possible, meaning it might build a little more muscle than Dianabol, but it has a lot more side effects. And to me, that's just not worth it. So take that for a little bit.
This question, I guess, would go individual case by case, but maybe more of a general guideline. So Nico Cantemir wants to know if your prep is going fine, you're shredded, ready for competition, taking 80 grams of carbs peak week last week. Do you think it's a good idea? Reduce Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday to 0 carbs.
If you look good and you're not like overblown carved up, which I'm assuming you wouldn't be on 80 grams of carbs a day. That's pretty low. I would just stay on that. I think that's low enough. If you're still could be a little tighter, sometimes you see someone on Monday, they're posing for you like, I'd like to see you down another 2 pounds. In that case, I would go lower. I would just get rid of the carbs completely, deplete them down for 3 days, and then carb them up. And hopefully by that time, he would have lost that pound or 2 that he needed to lose. But if you're perfect and you're ready and you look pretty good, even though you might be a little flat on 80 grams, keep them on the 80 grams. And then on, Wednesday after the last workout, start carving them up. That's just what I would do, because the less you change that last week, the better you are, unless the person needs to be leaner, in which case you're going to do some extreme stuff, or you're going to push them a little harder with more cardio, less food, that kind of stuff. So it's really based on how the person looks.
Question about MK677. Do you find it to be better, I guess, quote unquote, better than peptides?
Well, it is a peptide, essentially. I mean,
that's kind of what I was like.
Yeah, it's an oral
Yeah,
peptide. It's orally absorbable, which most of the peptides are not. This one is. I learned something this weekend too, talking to my good friend Victor Prisk. You know what the MK stands for? Merck.
Mortal Kombat.
No, Merck. So in other words, all these drug companies that before they actually develop a drug that gets FDA approved, they give it a code like Merck 677, and they never actually approved that drug for use. So it stayed as MK677, and that's why it's called that. But it's a growth hormone releasing peptide. Okay, so it stimulates the pituitary to release its own growth hormone. How much growth hormone gets released is really very individualistic. It depends on the person. Everyone responds to these releasing peptides differently. Is the oral better than or less, potent than the injectable? I don't know. I don't know if anyone's ever quantified it. They say the oral is absorbable. I know that people's growth hormone levels do go up a little on it. It seems to me that the injectable would be more potent, because usually injectables are, but I can't quantify which one's better for you. So if you don't like to take shots, take the oral. That's the best advice I can give you.
We've actually gotten a variety of different questions, but they're all along the same line. It's about low-calorie vegetables like tomatoes, spinach, mushrooms, and how you would factor in. Like, one question was about how you'd factor that in terms of the carb intake. The other one was about protein from vegetables. So in general, when you structure a diet for one of your clients, how do you factor vegetables into it?
Yeah, if I give my clients vegetables to eat, I never give them high sugar vegetables. So they're not eating, starchy stuff like peas and corn, or even like tomatoes are really fruits. So they're very high in sugar. So you're not going to really be eating tomatoes or anything red peppers, no good. I try to stick with the green stuff that's not high in carbs and not high in starchy, especially starchy carbs. So asparagus, green beans, spinach, some green salads, maybe some cucumbers and green peppers, that kind of stuff. Those are a lot safer, the green stuff, because there's not a lot of sugar in them or carbs that you're going to absorb. And so that's what I stick with. If I want to give someone a carb, I'll give them carbs. I'll give them rice and I'll give them potatoes. I'm not going to try to give them the carbs through the vegetables they're eating. The vegetables are really, to be honest with you, they're really filler is what they really are. And, if you get a little bit of nutrients out of them, that's great, but they're really filler most of the time. And when you use filler stuff, you want to use, vegetables that don't have a lot of, net carbs that you're going to absorb. As far as protein, I mean, some nuts have a little protein in them, obviously. Some vegetable sources have a little bit of protein in them. I don't usually calculate that into my total protein intake, because I think that plant protein is pretty useless anyway. Now, if you were scooping, pea protein into a shake, adding extra, thinking it doesn't count, that's not true. It's still calories, but I just don't, normally count the plant, protein content when I'm figuring out, what I'm going to, what the macros would be for the day.
Take one more question from Iron Hood Corporal. My question is, have you heard of using Preparation H for tightening up the skin around the stomach area, and what product for doing this?
I've heard people, put Preparation H on. They wrap themselves with saran wrap. They go and do cardio, or they, they go into a steam room and sweat. I'm not going to say it doesn't work, but I don't think it works very well if it does work. I mean, I guess if you're dehydrating your fat cells to a certain degree, it's going to look good. I wouldn't be doing that in like 6 weeks out. It doesn't burn fat. If anything, it's just going to suck a little water out of the fat cells down there. And walking around dehydrated or, with a lack of fluid in your body is not something you want to do on a regular basis, because number one, it doesn't help with fat burning at all. If anything, it's catabolic. It breaks. Your body likes to be well hydrated. It doesn't want to be dehydrated. So I don't know how these, I don't really think it's worth doing that. Now, for people who have like really bad, like loose skin in an area, I tell them to try anything on there, because you never know what might work. Like if you have like stretched out skin, maybe from, doing like, losing a lot of weight, or maybe you were pregnant and you lost a lot of weight from pregnancy, you might want to try to put it on there to try to shrink that skin a little bit. Will it work? Probably not, but it can't hurt even if you get 1 or 2% improvement. But as far as thinking that you're going to burn fat doing that, you're wasting your time.
That's going to do for this episode of Ask Dave. Right now on the channel, all new episode of the After Hours podcast of Heavy Muscle Radio. And then, of course, all of our coverage in person, in studio from this past weekend's Arnold Classic. A lot of contest coverage, interviews, as well as some fun stuff around the expo with Kai Green, Greg Doucette, who else we ran into? Brent and Autumn
Lee
Swanson.
Priest.
Yeah, Lee Priest, obviously, that was the a lot of
Ian
fun.
Valliere.
Ian Valliere making a cameo appearance as well. So a lot of fun, a lot of good content that we shot at the expo. We kind of branched out a little this time. Usually we go to these shows, full transparency, and we're kind of like, all right, let's go interview our sponsor. Let's go do some, interviews with whoever else we see. But they're always pretty much canned interviews, right? Like, okay, ask them a couple of questions about their company, their sponsor, their affiliation, but then maybe get a thought or two about the actual contest or whatever the case be. This time we were like, you know what? Let's be a little off the walls, have some fun. Let's catch somebody off guard. Let's, do things a little differently this year. So it was well received. And I did want to give a special shout out to really all of you, in the RxMuscle community throughout the course of the weekend. I mean, we had so much fun just interacting with you, again, on the live streams, in our contest coverage and everything that we did at the expo, everything on Instagram, whatever. So this was a lot of fun. That's really, for all that we do, to me, that's one of the most satisfying aspects of it. The fact that we're there, but we're bringing you along for it. And you guys are constantly giving us your feedback in terms of what you like, what you don't like, what you want to see, who you want to, see us interview or whatever. So really cool experience. And then, of course, we look forward to doing it all over again in October at the Olympia, which is going to be an absolute party, 60th year anniversary. So there's going to be certainly a lot of elements to cover there, and it's going to be a lot of fun. But again, thank you to the RxMuscle community for making this another fun weekend contest coverage and, contest to cover. So again, if you haven't already done so, subscribe below, hit the notification bell. If you like what you're watching, hit the like button, comment below. And as always, we appreciate all of your support. For Dave Palumbo, I'm Sadiq Faruqi. We'll see you next time.